has a special guest. As you can see, this is Aaron Pilsan, who's also a pianist, and we basically grew up in the same class with the same teacher, so we've known each other for a very long time, and he was kind enough to be part of this video and part of this next discussion. So the question of today's video is, what is it like to be a young musical kind of protege child, like seen as a very talented young kid, and then make the transition to being a serious professional musician in the industry?
First of all, I'm really happy to be here on your channel, and I think what we all have in common is that our parents are no musicians.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's
we were all kind of discovered by our music schools, and I think we were all on stage from a very young age.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of attention, and we thought, probably all of us, that we are kind of the center of the world.
Yeah.
And as we grew older, we kind of discovered that there are several other pianists, and also really good pianists. So what it felt like for me personally was that I feel like as I'm getting older and older, I'm still 25, but that I feel more responsibility also to contribute to the music world. And as I was younger, I was just doing what I liked playing, and
just enjoying it.
And now I'm considering more consciously what I can do to improve the music world, and what I can give to the audience.
I think that for me there were several things that changed. I would say the first big thing that changed was my attitude towards the stage. Especially from the age between, I would say, 7 and 13, I would perform many times, especially like shorter performances within a larger cast of musicians. And of course, I remember being nervous in a way out of principle, but never really realistically reflecting on what I was doing, that I was going on stage, people were looking at me, I had to perform. So all these thoughts didn't really occur to me. And I remember quite strongly when that suddenly shifted, and I was suddenly so aware of the vulnerability that exists on stage. And it coincided perfectly also with like general puberty. So I remember that for me was a real shift in perspective, not just in terms of stage, but of course within that, everything, why I make music, the mentality behind music making, the mentality behind connecting with the audience. I remember that was a real turning point for me, which I think wouldn't have been as drastic if that whole child prodigy type existence before wouldn't have been as strongly pronounced.
I think an interesting question also is, when is that point actually? When do you stop being a child protege, whatever, and start being a serious musician? I mean, obviously there is no exact point, but
when you stop looking cute, I think.
I mean, there's also not just the process inside yourself, but also the outside process. Because the audience always loves young children playing the piano. But as you grow older, I think it's around maybe age of 13, 14. You're not just a cute little, in my case, boy who plays the piano, and the audience just claps because it's the boy playing. Later you really have to be good. You're a child, people just find it cute and they would clap anyways. But when you turn older and also the repertoire becomes more difficult, people really expect you to be good.
And do you feel like there is a change of perception, like not only people expect more of you, but they suddenly become much more critical as well? Like before, when you made a mistake, it was like, whatever, it's just amazing that you're playing by heart. And now at that point, suddenly it's like, oh, a lot of criticism too.
I mean, that could also be because you also change the teachers usually in time. And the teachers in the universities, they usually are more critical than the ones in the music school. They also have like older students, so they know what you're going to be like in a few years probably. Whereas the music school teacher usually teaches children, so you are his probably best or second best or whatever.
Another thing that I really noticed, which can be both positive and negative depending on the individual situation, is that many times you might play a concert somewhere and then audience will come backstage and talk to you and say, yeah, I saw you when you were 11 in that place. And especially if you played a lot when you were younger, also in different places around maybe your area, your local area, or maybe in your country. I found many times that I go somewhere and there is not the feeling of a clean slate. Obviously not everywhere, obviously not, and especially in the bigger halls, no question, you come there and you're a new musician that's performing there, a debut in a big hall is a completely different thing. But I would say, especially if you come back and play in cycles, that you've played before, like people come back and it's also a nice thing for them, because I think they feel that they have sort of watched you grow up, which is of course a nice thing. You feel closer to your audience, but there's also this feeling of, you know, having to sort of prove that you have matured, having to prove that you are not a naive, sweet little girl or boy anymore, but you now have mature views and you've sort of developed a personality. And I found myself, especially in these first transition years, maybe with 18, 19, that I've really felt the need to show that I'm not a little girl anymore.
Would you say that you kind of keep a bonus with that audience? The audience that knows you from a young age, or would you say it's rather a challenge for you because you always feel you have to prove something to them?
I think that in the beginning, as I said, these 19 years old, I think it felt as a challenge, because I felt like I had to erase the child picture and create the adult picture. But I think now I see it more as a privilege. I feel like there's a real sense of familiarity and camaraderie. So now I sense that it's a privilege. But there was a time where I wanted to create that shift of perspective.
It's interesting. For me, I must say that I found that shift was almost only in the perception of the audience. I never felt that transition so actively. I never felt such a big difference between young playing and older playing. For me, it was very natural. It's just, I always tried to give my best on stage, and that just continues until now, basically. So I didn't feel that for me something changed. I only felt that suddenly people were speaking differently about me. But I just thought I was doing it seriously when I was young, and I'm doing it seriously now, basically.
Do you think it could be because the development you're going through is just a slow process that you don't really actively feel it? But the people from outside, they see you maybe once a year or maybe every 2 years, so they will realize there is a bigger difference.
Exactly. I think it's exactly that, because we put in so much work every day that for us it doesn't make a difference. It basically feels like it stays the same. It's a very gradual progress, and I think that's an important point to also make when we're talking about, you know, talented protege kids, whatever. Sometimes people see a young kid playing and they're like, oh my god, he has a God-given talent. It's a miracle, but it's not a miracle. It's just he's been practicing, like we had been practicing. Of course, you can have like an innate musicality or something, but you can play the piano simply because you're practicing and you're putting in the work.
Another thing I would like to ask you also, especially because I remember that huge shift where you started learning insane amounts of repertoire and you would just be like learning new pieces, because I remember very clearly that when I was younger there was this total structure to learning repertoire. It would be, this is your first Beethoven sonata, and now you're gonna dive into German romantic repertoire, and now you're gonna play something by Brahms. And it was like, oh, my first piece by Brahms, and this is my first chamber music piece. And I remember very clearly this structure that obviously came from our teacher, you know. Of course, if we loved a piece, we could immediately go to him, and I never encountered him discouraging us from learning a piece if we wanted it, but there was a definite structural direction into what made sense to learn at what point in time. And at some point, that shifted, and it was suddenly my own responsibility to decide what to learn. If I want to learn something, I need to take the initiative. Do you remember when that happened, when that perspective shifted?
I mean, for me personally, it was, you know, that I studied a lot of Bach's music as well. And that started when I was around 16. I remember listening to Well-Tempered Clavier in summer holidays for like every day, the whole thing. And then after I came back home, I didn't have a piano there. So after we returned home, I would just start learning these pieces. And we have been, all of us have been playing the partitas in like a special project with a teacher. And that was probably one of the few pieces by Bach I've played before. But from then on, I started being interested on my own. And I even told Professor Kemmerling that I was studying it, and he was really encouraging, like, do this. But he was never like, oh, we just bring this to the lesson. It was more like, do it for yourself, enjoy discovering it. And he would also listen to one or the other piece, but never like, okay, you have to bring it. We would just continue working the pieces he thought were for my musical development very important.
Yeah.
But this was also very important. I think that was also his decision to let myself discover it for myself.
I feel like it's really important that it comes from you, like from the musician from within, because you're a great example, and this is also why we wanted to discuss this topic specifically with you, because as you said, you don't have musician parents, so you didn't exactly have that musical surrounding that other people have. But at the same time, because we've known each other for, I don't know how many years, 16?
Like
no, 18
12
years?
12 years? I mean, I think 12 years.
13 years, whatever, I thought it was 18, whatever. So,
years.
for a dozen years. And we've really seen each other grow up with music, and you always were somebody in the class that was very like thinking forwardly and very just naturally interested. You know, there always were some people that I would say, you know, played to successfully finish the piece they were, you know, learning right now, and that's it. But you always were one of those, you know, thinking of so many things, you know, what can I learn next, and being interested in music and just in repertoire in general. And I think this inner drive is so important also when it comes to this transition from talented kid, which can be very also imposed by the parents, which it totally wasn't with us, but could be, and to actual musician, which I think cannot be imposed by the parents anymore. This is something that has to come from within, and that you have to really feel.
I mean, then we are in the discussion what talent is. I think that this is what we all have, this like curiosity, like the hunger for music,
exactly.
Because then you would also practice more, you know, you would be interested in what the others do, you would be more careful in the lessons. It's not just how good you are as a child, but how interested you are in developing.
Absolutely. Sort of a different thing, but it's, I think, something that we have witnessed maybe with also young musicians that came after us, in a way that I sometimes feel like there are trends to keep young, cute-looking musicians young and cute-looking, and to sort of deny them the opportunity to start the development of becoming more self-sufficient, becoming more individualistic in a way. And I mean, obviously it's not good, but do you think that there is maybe a trend in the business, because, you know, cuteness is cool, to make it difficult for cute prodigies to become
Are you talking
musicians?
about the organizers now, or the parents?
Everything.
And
I think because I think the parents would do it because they know that it is an effective method.
Well, I definitely think that nowadays the younger, you know, the more sensational it is. We have now 5-year-olds basically touring, you know, and that obviously is crazy and completely beside the point of actual music making. But I think that from the teacher side, it definitely shouldn't be. I mean, a teacher is there so that you can grow, no matter what you present outwardly to the industry. But a good piece of advice for any young musicians, or also parents of young musicians that might be watching this, which is that it has to come from within. And if the young person that is super talented and maybe also already successful doesn't show a genuine interest and will to pursue this with all his heart, then it's probably not going to be the right thing.
Can I ask one last question? It's not necessarily directed also at our own experience, but also at more extreme examples. What do you think about real huge success very early on? Like if you are a 13-year-old superstar, do you think that that is good for your long-term relationship to music? Do you think it's bad, or do you think it's more or less irrelevant?
It just matters where the success comes from. If it's looking cute on a poster and playing really fast and, you know, wearing nice dresses, then it can become a problem. But because once you grow older, you realize that that's fake, or it's not what you really are. But if you get the success from your own work, and I mean that can transition into a mature career if it's really about your musical personality. I mean, there are several cases of young prodigies, like you know, Barenboim and Rubinstein, and like small children playing, and they still are really good at this at the age of 60 or 70. That's because it's their own musicality which is presented. Also, of course, if they look cute, they look cute. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it, but if it's just the superficial level, then it can become a problem later, and also a source of bigger crisis. What do you think?
I wonder on an abstract level a bit if being very successful obviously also goes with like being in a bubble of very few people that sort of manage your success, and whether that, at least in the short term, inhibits your ability to create own views, to decide what type of personality you want to have, who you really are, especially if it's successful. It goes on and the bubble becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and at some point the bubble will burst. I think it can go well, but I have like this maybe slightly pessimistic view that it's much easier for it to go wrong than it to go right.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to, as you said, understanding what the success means, where is it coming from, and pursuing it for the right reasons. Not for the success or money or whatever it is, but because you love what you do. Because I think music and art in general is such a personal thing, and you put it all your soul, all your heart, and you have to do it because you are convinced that this is the way to live, and not for any success story, especially when you're young. So like you said, you were on a summer holiday, you heard the Well-Tempered Clavier, and you knew, I want to pursue this. Like there was no success thought behind that. It was just because of the music itself.
And I think also that for any child starting to play an instrument at the age of 4, 5, or 6, I think it's obvious that at that point your motivation to play is much less conscious. I mean, maybe you like the applause, maybe you like sort of the special status it gives you within a certain group, which is totally fine. Maybe you're very talented and you just feel amazing that you're really good at something. I think it should be encouraged to re-examine the reasons why you do it from a certain age onwards. And I remember that Kiveli, the teacher that we all had, from a certain age onwards, he would regularly ask the question, why do you make music? Why do you want to be a musician? And it would be these evenings where we would all sit around a large table and everyone had to answer the question why they wanted to be a musician. And it would always be very interesting discussions, and those started, I remember when I was about 13 or 14.
And basically the answer, because I want to be a famous pianist, was a no-go answer.
Yeah, it wasn't a qualified answer.
Which was the true answer anyway. We have been talking about the question if a young career is bad for you. But what you think if you really just focus on the development and you don't play any concert until you're 35? Do you think that's also because the trend in the music world is just to... But you know, earlier I know that, for example, Pollini, he won the Chopin competition and then took a whole year off just to study after he won the competition. And nowadays nobody would even think about it. Do you think it's a possibility?
I also feel like, as you say, I mean, the industry kind of doesn't allow it because today everything is so fast-paced that, you know, we're like, oh my god, we're going to be forgotten. But I do think it's an interesting concept. That example of Pollini, where somebody that obviously already has stage experience, you know, winning a competition, then takes a year off, I think is perfectly valid and a good thing to do. Now, of course, if you're someone only practicing in his living room for 35 years without stage experience, I think you're gonna fail at your first performance. But I think it's very interesting to take time off to study and to, you know, process things and discover new repertoire. I think that definitely is interesting, and maybe we should actually dare to do it more.
Although I think that if you compare the type of musician that I would say the business allowed for 100 years ago, or even just 60 or 70 years ago, versus the type of musician that the business allows nowadays, I think that, unfortunately or fortunately, there are both sides to it, there are many more skills that I would say are needed to be a successful person in entertainment, no matter what entertainment sector that is. And I think that next to being able to really play your instrument or be able to do your craft in a really good way, there's also much more, I think, entrepreneurial initiative that is needed. If you just practice your craft until you're 35, you will only be able to do the breakthrough if that's your story. You know, the musician who didn't play a single concert until he was 35. I mean, it's a great marketing story.
Focusing on the art itself, music itself, that is always valuable and always helpful and always important. And with that subject that we chose today, it is what's going to help you through the transition. Ultimately.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us. It was our pleasure to have you here. And if you want to see more of Aaron, he has his own YouTube channel that you can find in the box, and you can click on the link and check out his videos. We hope that you enjoyed it, and you can leave us your thoughts in the comments down below, and we hope to see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.